I have not lost my mind. Yes, I am wearing the same shirt I've worn in other podcasts. Why? Because I recorded a bunch of them in the same day, so leave me alone. Let's jump right into the history of the periodic table. It was the 1860s. So what was happening at that point? Well, let's see. Civil War was going on. Gregor Mendel, the guy who did, all the genetic crosses, he was doing his thing. About that point, we knew of lots of elements. Not near as many as today, but we knew of a good many. But the problem was they were really, really hard to find. Like, what are the elements in air? Well, how do you know what to look for when you can't see it? When you dig up stuff out of the ground, how do you know what's in it? How do you know if it's a bunch of elements or whatever? In the 1860s, due to a guy named Stanislao Cannizzaro, who was an Italian, of course, he came up with a method of accurately measuring the molar mass. So look on your periodic table. That method of determining molar masses was largely attributed to Cannizzaro. Now that people had that data to go with the elements, they could start understanding it more. And it came down to a guy named Dmitry Mendeleev. He was a Russian chemist, and Mendeleev was working on how can you set up all the elements that we know such that it makes more sense. So Mendeleev took all the elements that he knew about, that the world knew about, and he wrote them down on cards. So he laid them out. And he tried to take all the elements that reacted similarly. So he took sodium and potassium. Those two things both explode when you mix them with water. So he would put those in the same column. He would take oxygen and sulfur, and they have a very similar reactivity. And he would put those in the same column. And what he noticed was, as he built his little table of elements and their masses, he noticed that there seemed to be a trend, a repeating or periodic trend. Dmitry Mendeleev says, hey, I'm on to something here. I'm onto a periodic table of the elements. Now, he was not the only one doing this. If you actually go back and look, Mendeleev had lots and lots of other people at the same time working on something similar. He was just the first one to come up with the periodic table the way we kind of know it today, and since he was the first one to come up with it, then he gets credit. He listed his elements, though, not by atomic number, because they didn't know the atomic number back then. Remember, this is before they ever discovered the electron. He did it by atomic mass that Cannizzaro had labeled, and since they knew the atomic mass, that's what he ordered it in. If you look at your periodic table now, just grab your periodic table. Look at the periodic table. Here, I got mine. Find me an element where the atomic mass number doesn't keep going up, where it actually dips down a little bit. Go ahead, take time. We got all the time in the world. Well, I found one. Look at cobalt and nickel. Cobalt and nickel, it actually goes down a little bit. See if you can find another one. And as you look around, you'll notice that they don't always keep going up. Most of them do, but some of them, they're little dips. He just figured that that's the way things were going to be, that some of them were slightly out of order. And it wasn't until much later that a guy named Henry Moseley said, hey, I got a better idea. Now that we know the atomic number of things, why don't we create a different periodic table, just tweak it a little bit, and let's make it so that the elements go by order of atomic number. And that's the history of things. I'll just show you these real quick and we'll talk about them in class. These are just some alternate periodic tables. This one's my favorite. And for the truly nerdy of you, there's one coming up. That one's actually in 3D. You can actually buy this one. Looks something similar to this. Here's a 3D periodic table. Here's one that makes absolutely no sense to me. Here's the periodic table of the elephants. Yes, I'm just that nerdy. So let's go take a look at what Mendeleev's periodic table looked like, and then we can look at, oh, well, what did that tell us? How was it helpful? All right, so if we pull up Mendeleev's periodic table, this is what it looked like. This is all the elements that we knew about at this point. There's a lot of elements we don't have. What is the importance of this? Well, notice how he's got blank spots. Notice right in here. See how there's a blank spot? He knew by arranging elements in a certain order, he knew that there were holes right here. Well, what is the mass of this one right here? Well, it's somewhere between 40.1 and 47.9. Well, what does it react like? Well, it's going to react something similar to boron and aluminum. And he actually called this one eka aluminum, or after aluminum. Only later did we find out that that one was actually gallium. And then even below that should be another one. And it should be somewhere between 65.4 and 74.9. And this one ended up being In, or indium. And this one right here, here's another hole. Under titanium should be another element. We'll call that zirconium. And by having these holes, all of a sudden, he was able to predict, hey, here's an element, and that element should act like this and weigh this much. And after he published this periodic table, you saw people all over the place all of a sudden finding elements where they didn't think there used to be some before. They found there were people finding elements that had been confused with the other elements, right? And so it was kind of a golden age of finding elements. Very, very important for us, because using his information, we were able to figure out what elements are. If you know what you're looking for, it's a heck of a lot easier. This is just another image of what Mendeleev was looking for. And you can see here, these are the question marks. These are the elements that we ought to be able to find. If we knew what those elements were, it reacts like this, it's got a mass of 100, then we can find them all of a sudden. Just another look at the same thing. And last but not least, this is a picture of Mendeleev. This is what he looked like. He was a snazzy guy. He's got a serious beard going on. But it was very, very important. He was not, the sole creator. Like I said, there are lots of people doing it. Moseley helped an awful lot, and other people have come up with periodic tables. But what I want you to notice about the periodic table is right there in the middle. From element number 21 over to 30, that entire section, the periodic table you've grown up with, has only been there since the 1950s. Before that, it was somewhere else. You just need to understand, maybe when you have kids, or maybe when you're an older person, maybe the periodic table will be different. Maybe it'll be in 3D. Maybe we'll find elements that we haven't found yet. But that's the history of the periodic table.